Hey everyone, thank you very much for watching my brand new video today. Today we're going to be looking at your rear trailing arms on your 2004 to 2008 Grand Prix. Although this applies to any W body car going back ages. Like they pretty much use the same trailing arm setup GM has for the last 15, 20 years or so. So it applies to most big GM sedans or anything like that. But this is specifically on the 04 to 08 Grand Prix. Before I get started and show you some stuff, just want to remind you to like and subscribe. Let me know you guys like what I'm doing so I keep putting out content. Other than that, let's get started. So before we get started, of course, I do have to remind you to always be safe in what you're doing. Make sure you're not doing this with the car just jacked up on a jack, because you see my jack is not even doing anything right now, because you will need that later. Instead, I have it jacked up on the jack stance. In this case, I have it going right on the rail of the car. Obviously, you don't want to be doing jacking and supporting with jacks on any suspension components, because you're working on one of the main components itself. Yeah, just a reminder to be safe. Make sure you're protecting yourself at all costs when you're doing this. But let's get started. So the first thing you want to do is you want to assess the situation. That means looking over the components to make sure they're in good condition. Now, on the surface, this actually seems like a pretty easy job. It's really just this big bolt and nut here. And that bolt and nut there. Problem that comes up with this, there's actually a good and a bad to it. So the bad is this guy. This guy tends to seize up in here quite frequently. So there are some tricks to get it out, but we'll get to that in a bit. Hopefully, we'll see how far I have to go, but we'll get to that. Here, the good part now, getting into here to get this nut and bolt, as you can see, the rail runs right there, and it's very hard to get in. But as you see, there's actually this bracket. It's held on with three 15 millimeter bolts, and just so you know, these are 18 millimeters, and this is 24. So you can actually drop down this rail. Now, there's a couple ways to go about this, and we'll get to that. First thing you want to do is just assess. So as you can see, it's really just two nuts and bolts, and 3 bolts that go into the chassis itself. The next thing you want to do is you want to do a parts comparison. I always recommend doing this before you get started, simply because you want to make sure that you have the right parts before you start taking everything apart and create a situation for yourself. So you can see this is my new trailing arm. We just line that right up and make sure it looks just about correct, which it does. Now you'll notice that whereas these trailing arms here, in my opinion, are pretty much junk, even from the get-go, because they're hollowed out and they tend to bend easily. Mine are not in too bad condition, but they tend to be a problem. Whereas I'm going with a boxed one, which is, although it's a thinner bar in comparison to this one, it's stronger because it's completely boxed over. So I'll be actually upgrading at the same time while I do this. But you don't need to do that, of course. You can just go to the factory one. But I do recommend, for the price you pay to get a boxed one versus the factory one, you may as well pay the few bucks more and get a boxed one. Good thing is that most manufacturers, like I think Dorman and so on, actually sell them as boxed already. So not too bad, not too bad. Now before you begin, you want to spray everything which I've done already. You spray with WD-40 or anything, so you spray all the main bolts and everything here, and of course same thing up in there. Once it's all sprayed and everything, you begin. We're just going to set that up there. And you're going to start off with this nut. So it's just, again, it's a 24 mil. This part we'll worry about after, but right now you just want to get the nut off. So we're going to begin with taking that off here now. So let me just move this back a bit. I have a boxed end. Hopefully it's not too bad. What we're going to do actually, now as you can see between here and here, there's not a lot of room to work with. But, give me a second. If you get yourself a breaker bar, along with an extension, it'll give you enough room to work with. Just enough to crack the bar, which is all you really want to do. So, sometimes it cracks just with the box end, which is all great, no problem. In this case here, it's not going to. So we put 24 mil on. Then I have my extension, and then I have my breaker bar over here. See? Go ahead and place that there. We're just going to go up and break that nut off. Once you break the nut, you can't actually keep going with this. Because you can see, even with my deep socket, not a lot of room to play. So we're just going to break that now. And already it's pretty close. So we're going to take that off. Take that off. But now that we've broken the nut, we can go ahead and use the box end to take it off. It's good to have a box end that has this curve on it, because as I'm bringing it up, the curve goes through here. It gives me a lot more leverage. Otherwise, I would only have a smaller amount of room to play with. And truth be told, actually, because of the angle of the camera, see my hand will go here. I don't want to hit it, but I want to have you guys have a good look. I'm trying to avoid using everywhere I can, but you get the idea. And that comes right off. It's gonna stop for a second because really I don't want to sit here and record you guys, you know, my usual shtick. I don't want you guys to just see me spending time taking off a bolt. So I'm gonna do that, and we'll move on to the next step, which is this side here. I'll be right back. Alright, as you see, I got the nut off here, and I'll just show you that. No innuendos intended. But nice and easy. Came off, just took a, I don't know, a minute and a half or so of just torquing it with that box end. But everything came off. But this guy is the one that's all the trouble, because this here, it's not threaded in here. It's just actually smooth inside the knuckle here, but it builds up a crap ton of corrosion. So you'd think you'd be able to just get that out, and the hope is you can, but honestly, you may have to resort to different methods. So the first thing you do is you could just get a hammer and tap it out. That may work, may not. Next you can do is you can try an air gun. Actually, in the second thought, you may want to try the air gun first and try and break it off this way. So I'm actually going to do that in a second. Use the air gun, try and break this. Likely though, it may not, depending on the condition of your car, but you could try. If not, get a hammer and try and tap it. Not incredibly hard at this point, but you want to try and break it. And if you can see there, you can see a ton of corrosion there. See that? Right in there, right into the bolt. If not, you may have to get a breaker bar, and if that doesn't work, then you'll have to get a torch. All these things I have available to me now, so we will work on it today, but we will try in each stage and hoping that we can get it done the easiest way possible the first time around. So let's first try with the air gun. Alright, so we're going to give the air gun the go first. So we're just going to put that on against a 24 millimeter. See, that's not going anywhere. What you're looking for, because it's just, disconnect that for a sec. Because it's just it's not threaded in here and everything, it's a smooth shaft inside. You're looking for all the corrosion to come out and the bolt to kind of it'll turn, and then it'll kind of wobble a bit as it comes out. That's what you're looking for. As you can see here, that didn't work. So we're going to go on to using a hammer. Okay, so you can use this in conjunction with the air gun. So what you're trying to do is you're going to hit the knuckle and hit the bolt. Be careful with hitting the bolt. You don't want to damage it. Luckily, you can give a little bit more juice to it, but, you know, still be careful. And we're just going to knock it and try and break it loose. Okay. We're going to reattach the air gun to the air line. We're going to go at it again. Nope. Still no movement. I'm going to try a little bit more. Don't want to be wailing on it because you still don't want to damage any components. So, you know, we're giving good solid shots. Here it's kind of hard because you got the brake here. So it's hard to give it a good solid shot on the bolt, but yeah, you're just trying to break it loose. I'll give it one more go with the air gun. Alright, as you can tell, that's not going to work, so we're going to move on to the next step, which I'm going to try a breaker bar. So as you can see, I've got my breaker bar attached. I'm going to go ahead and give it a little bit of go right here, right now. As you can see, got under here. We're going to give it a go and see if we can use the breaker to crack it. Sliding off there. I'm just going to go underneath the car. I think it'll be easier if I do that. All right. Even with the breaker, it's not going to go. So I'm going to resort to a torch. I'll record using the torch, but I want to make sure I stress to you extreme safety. If you don't know how to use a torch, just don't use it. Maybe either A, bring this to the shop, or continue with the breaker bar. The breaker bar would be your next best source if you can't do it with a torch, because it's extreme safety. I have to warn for that, but we're going to go ahead and go with the torch now. So as you can see, I'm torching here now. Again, extreme safety and caution, I want to warn. You want to be warming around where the bolt is here, just slightly. Yeah. You want to be warming around the bolt and around the knuckle. You want to be careful doing it on the side where the trailing arm is itself. Simply because the rubber bushing is there that can ignite. You want to be just working right here. You want to take just a couple minutes, warm around it, moving evenly across the knuckle itself for a couple minutes, not too long. Essentially, you want to do it until you start seeing a little bit of smoke coming out from within that opening there, which I can't obviously touch, but where I'm heating, the unthreaded part of the knuckle. You want to see just a tad bit of smoke coming out of there. Yeah, I think that's good. I'm going to shut off. Okay, and as you can see, she's moving. So as a reminder to you, now first off, I kind of rushed quickly so I didn't get to show you because I didn't want it to cool. But I used a torch, warmed it up, and then used the bigger breaker bar that I had, which is a non-ratcheting breaker bar, and I broke it. You can actually hear the clunk as it cracked open, but it worked with the breaker bar. Then I'm now using, I have a ratcheted breaker bar, which is this one here, and I'm using it to kind of go. Now, one thing I want to point out though is in there where I don't want to touch, it's hot still. It's not threaded, remember? Nor is any part in here. All you're doing is by spinning it, you're kind of breaking out all the corrosion and rust. That all came out since I warmed it up and I've been spinning it. So all you're really doing that is to break out any corrosion or anything. Once you do that, you're going to actually use your hammer and just tap, and it should, once it's broken, completely all the corrosion's out of there, should just kind of gently tap out. Now I think we're good there. I'm going to try the hammer now. Give me 1 second. Just going to move around. You're going to come over here with the hammer. You're just going to tap. Let's do that, just that. Always utilize the tools at your hand, you know. Try different things. Sometimes combinations of stuff work. Let me set an angle for you here. Yeah. Bring that around. Okay. That bad boy is in there. Alright, so I'll stop for a second. I'll be honest with you. It's actually pretty straightforward. It just takes a little bit of elbow grease in it. So I'm going to keep working on that. I'll let you guys know in a second. But really all it is going under the car, spinning it a little bit more so it builds out, keeps breaking out all that corrosion. And then tapping the bar through until this bolt goes right through. So we're just going to keep working on that. I'll be right back. So as you can see, it's all done. It just took a little bit of elbow grease, kind of working that bolt a little bit. And if you look here now, let me just get, you can see it's all loose. Even a nickel tap. It comes out and you can see all the crap that came out of just that one little spot. And that's what holds it all in. That's the corrosion that's built up in there. However, now that we've got it and it's loose, you don't want to take it out yet. But you do have a couple options here. And it all depends on what you have. Now I have a work table with a vise, so I'm not gonna yet loosen those 18 mil. I'll do that on my vise. If you don't have a vise though, you want to do that on the car because you need something for leverage. If you can't give yourself any type of leverage, getting that nut and bolt out right there is gonna be a problem. So it's an 18 mil to remind you. You need one. It's a similar idea. You just have to really loosen that bolt there. But it may start spinning on the other side, so it's good to have an 18 mil. Either two 18 mil wrenches or an 18 mil wrench and an 18 mil socket. It's kind of hard to fit in there, but you can. And then work it that way. In this case here though, because I do have my vice grip, I'm not going to do that. Instead, I'm going straight for those 15 mils. So let me see if I get a good angle for you. Kind of an awkward angle, but does that work? I hope it's working okay, guys. Let's see. 1, 2, I think so. Alright, so I have my air gun, an extension, and the 15 mil. And we're just going to go underneath here. And it's just the 3, and you want to take them right out. Well, I may actually don't even need the extension here. The car's not all the way up. So we're just going to take the 15 mil as is. And these should hopefully. Okay, one. Because I have the compressor off, otherwise we'd be running, you guys would hear the loud noise. I'm losing some air pressure. Yeah, I lost some air pressure. Okay, unfortunately, I got to put on my compressor and it's really loud. So I'm going to stop the video, but they're coming out. I just don't have any more air pressure in my gun itself. Alright, I decided to run the air gun, but I wanted to show you guys. I took out the one bolt back there, but I said for the final bolt, I'll just show you. Hopefully you can hear me okay over my compressor. But essentially, and that just drops right down. There we go. And then once that drops down, that just slides right out. The whole bar is clear. So we have the bar here, and as you can see, I've hooked it up onto my vise, as I said, which is incredibly useful in situations like this. So what we're going to do is we're going to release it from here. So there's 3 things you're looking at. Is you got to take off this nut here, you got to get the bolt out of here, and you got to get that bolt out of there. And there's a few ways to go about it. The first thing though is we're going to get the nut. It's 18 mil. So all you do is you're going to put your 18 mil wrench on here. There you go. And hopefully if everything goes well, that should just come right off with the air gun and the wrench. There we go. Sometimes this bolt can be seized through, in which case you'll have to hammer. In this case, as you can see, it's coming out beautifully. And this came off. No problem. And this bolt here, you can see there is rust and corrosion that's in there. That, of course, sits within the arm itself, so that's built up in there. And, of course, that's the threaded part where your nut goes. And now we've got this part here. So what you want to do, though, because as you saw earlier, it does get seized on there. So we're going to bring this in close. And before we go hammer it, we're going to try and loosen it out a bit more. Just to create some movement so we can hammer it out, because we'll likely need to hammer it out. So what I do is I just grab the breaker bar. It doesn't matter which way you're going. All you're trying to do is get it to move freely. So as you can see, I'm spinning it around within the bushing. Oh, let me just readjust my vise here. And all you're doing is trying to get it to move freely, that's all. Because once it moves freely, it's freed up from within the old bushing. Okay. We're going to attempt to hammer it out now. So let's just open that up. Again, because we're doing it, I don't really care about the control arm because we're replacing it. Bring that in as close as possible. I can go closer. Let's go a little closer. Okay. Create as minimal vibration as you can when you're hammering. Get our hammer. We're just going to give it a few taps through. Of course, make sure your table is as clear as possible. You don't want anything falling out. It seems crazy that I'm doing this and that you have to do it, but really it's the only way. The good news is on the bolt that goes through, now remember, number one, you're really interested in these threads. The other threads that are behind there, it's only up to about from here to here for the nut. That's all you're really interested in. Two is at the tip of the bolt, it's smoothed off and rounded. So even if you hammer this out, again, you don't want to damage it, please be careful. But if you hammer a little bit, and it smooths out like what is happening here, you'll still be able to get the nut on it. That's what's important. As long as the bolt doesn't bend, and as long as you don't damage the actual threads, you're okay. Now she's coming. This one's really in there. You can see the rust and the corrosion that's coming out of it. There. Done. Hopefully it won't be that hard that you have to do yours. It depends on the level of the car, the condition, and all sorts of different things, but mine is, those bolts are pretty in there. And just so you can see what the bolt looks like, you can see it's a smooth bolt. Some of them come with splines sometimes, but mine doesn't have that. You can see there, and of course you can see within here, it's just smooth within the inside, but lots of rust and corrosion in there. That's it. Now that you've kind of got everything off, before you put the new bar back in, you do want to get kind of clean up some of this. So I'm just going to take a wire brush and just go over some of it. Try and get off as much as you can. Careful to the treads. You're not like, don't be like mashing this in here. You don't want to be damaging the treads or anything, but you want to get out as much buildup as you have within the threads where possible. clean up as best as possible here. You can see that's the big bolt there. Right? You're going to do the smaller bolt as well, which is over here. Fell down. There. Right. Now I'm going to clean that up more, but you get the idea. You want to do it to this brace here. Get in here as much as you can. Clean up any corrosion, rust. If you have any degreaser, wouldn't hurt. And if you want to take the time, and you have the time in the day, it wouldn't hurt to sand this down and paint it up and clean it up and essentially rebuild it. Up to you if you want to. I'm not going to. But I will probably likely spray it down with something after, maybe some undercoating or something to protect it, but I'm not going to rebuild it. All depends on how much time and what you want to do with it. Alright, and of course then you're also going to clean up over here. So in that you're just going to clean up around the knuckle. My apologies, just using my hand here, but and that's that. Okay, so before we begin, please take note of something on your new trailing arm, is that there is a way to put it. It's not the sides are equal at all. Forget this one has an offset on it, but the side that goes to the knuckle, it's got a much bigger opening because, as you know, it's a bigger bolt as you saw, but it's also narrow. Here, it's actually a little bit wider, but it's got a smaller hole. So keep this in mind when you're putting everything together. Also, make sure you're putting it together in the way that you took it out. So you see this here, when this mounts up into the car, it mounts this way, right? Sorry, this way. With the single bolt facing outside toward the front of the car. So make sure you're putting it the right way. So all you do is you're going to feed that in, line up the holes, right there, you see? And you're going to put the bolt through. There, and then you put your nut on. And in this case here, you're going to grab your air gun. I'm going to put my wrench on here. 18 mils once again. Oops, this way. We're just going to tighten that up. Hold that in place. Now the actual torque specifications for this bolt right here is 60 foot-pounds. Same with these three, 60 foot-pounds. And the big guy down here, I've actually had mixed information on what exactly it is, but what near as I can tell, it's 80 foot-pounds down here. So now that this is on, she is ready to go back in. So the first thing, or next thing, you're going to do is you got to put the bolt through here. You're not tightening this up yet, and there's a reason for that. I'll get to that in a bit. But you do want to put it on here. It is worth noting that when you release the trailing arm, because the trailing arm adds as a stabilizer, the suspension actually sometimes moves ever so slightly. So I actually found it easier to put this through here first and then put in the other three bolts after. So we're going to go and grab that and feed that big honking huge bolt through there. Right through. And do the nut up. Now at this point here, you can actually, wouldn't hurt to tighten it up. You can tighten it, not all the way. You want to get it just so this nut is as close to the knuckle as possible without being tight. And this you do by just putting on, I'll put on the breaker bar on here with the 24 mil. Let it just rest on the ground and I'll apply my hand to it. And then I just use my box end to tighten it up. Oops, wrong way. Alright. So this does take a little bit of time, obviously, because you have to do it by hand. Now, once you get it to a point that you can get the socket on, you can feel free to do it. But because there's very little room here, that's why I'm obviously going to go by hand. So, see, and it's, oops, once you've cleaned it up and everything's looking good, pretty straightforward. It's, you just go until to a certain point. So how about I'm going to pause it and I'll get back to it when it's at the point where I want it to be. I'm just going to go a little more. Again, you don't want to tighten it up. It's very crucial you don't tighten it up yet. But you can see it's pretty close now. The reason you're doing this is because you want this to be as stable as possible before you put this up, right? The piece back here. If you just have it loose, this is going to be moving about, or can move about. Essentially, what you're looking to do is get her about hand tight. Not even. Maybe once you get the hand tight, you just do like a half turn back. So we're going to go about there. That's good. So, let's take a look at something here. Okay. So if you look, you'll see the holes don't quite match up. That is because the suspension unit itself has moved. But it's actually not hard. If you look here, even with one hand, oops, I can pull it and line it up. But I do need the other hand to put a screw in. Let me, there. I think that's good. Now once you get that in, that pretty much holds now everything in place. And it's just a matter now of doing the other one. So I'm just going to grab 15 mil, which I have right in front of me here. I'm going to grab the extension too. Just going to trail them all in. This one here. Alright, so then I'm going to get the air gun now. I'm going to attach the air line to it. Just give me 1 second. Just going to grab my air line. And we're just going to push those up. We'll start with one from this side. So I'm going to go with this one here. Then we're going to go to one. And then we're going to go to the third one back there. Right. Now all that's left is to tighten everything up to specification. The one that's going to be tricky to do the specification is this one here, because it's there's no space to get your torque wrench. Right. You could try and get it from here if you've got a shallow socket, a shallow 18. You may be able to get it through here, but it will be tricky to do. If you have something that you could actually grip this before you put these 3 bolts in, then you can actually torque it with it not on the car. That's okay, because this one here, it's really these 3 and the one below the knuckles, the ones you got to worry about tightening on the car. But in this case here, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use 2 wrenches. I have a good feel for 60 foot-pounds. Don't do that. Don't do what I'm doing. Right? Make sure you're doing this to 60 foot-pounds, and these 3 to 60 foot-pounds. So I'm just going to get my torque wrench. I'm going to give each one a go to 60. So we'll start off with this one here. It's kind of awkward to do. Try this way and see if I can So once that's done and you tighten all those up, you're just going to tighten this here. And again, I'm just going to use the 2 wrenches. One here. We have to go the open end here. Right? And then we just tighten it up. Again, torque wrench would be my absolutely recommended. 60 foot-pounds is where you're going. Not quite. 60 there. She's good. This is the final piece here now. So all that up there is all nice and secure and tight. We're good there. Now it's just this last one here. The reason I didn't have you tighten this initially is because you actually have to settle the suspension. There's different terminologies for it, but essentially what all you're doing is jacking up the suspension so that the car sits at where it would sit normally. That means that when you jack it up, the car has to be off the jack stand. But this is tricky though, because you have the bolt that runs through here, and if you just jack it up, then your jack could be blocking the way of you getting access to the nut and the bolt. So you want to jack it from the knuckle right here. So there's different ways to do it. You can of course use a piece of wood or something like that. In this case here, I'm actually going to use the old trailing arm. However, if you do that, just like with anything else in the video, that's at your liability. The old trailing arm doesn't matter, but of course there is a degree of safety you have to precaution yourself with, and by doing this on trailing arm, you don't know the condition. It could break, it could crack while it's lifted. So again, I want to caution you to doing that. But that's what I'm going to do here today. Just going to use the old trailing arm to settle the suspension. As you can see, I'm making contact now. It is only contacting the knuckle, nothing else. We're going to lift up the car. Almost there. So the car's now off the jack. You can tell there or not, but it's off the jack. Now that's done, you're going to tighten this up to 80 foot-pounds. All I'm going to do is grab my box end wrench. I'm going to put it on the bolt side of things. I'll grab my torque wrench and my 24 mil with an extension. Where did I put the 24 mil with extension? Haha, there it is. And that fits right over there. Now because we've tightened this already, there's enough room to just fit that in. So we're going to put our torque wrench on here. By using the extension, gives us clearance from the brake components and also clearance of the bumper and everything up here. And then we're just going to tighten her up. Let's get the wrench, sorry, yeah, the box end settled. There we go. There we go. And now we're gonna move the box end, move the socket, drop the car down, nice and gentle like. And that's it. She's done. So only thing now is obviously you jack up the car properly, and we do that with safety. Make sure that you're being careful. Take out your jack stands, any components, make sure everything is all clear. There's nothing around that could puncture tires or anything like that. And then you drop your car down. Of course, you put your wheels on, drop your car down, tighten the wheels to specification, and you're all set. I'm hoping this video has helped you guys in doing your trailing arms. It's actually, aside from this actual one bolt here, which can be a bit of a pain, a nuisance, it's actually not that hard of a job, and it's something I recommend simply because the trailing arms that you get factory are junk. I mean, those things bend and warp very easily. Mine are actually on the better end of things, and I still did them just because they're old and the bushings have got worn out and stuff. But yeah, I would definitely recommend doing it. I want to thank you again so much for watching, and see you next video.